Was it possible for me to tell you that the world we live in now was never meant to exist? Instead of more and more nation-states, competing religions, and world powers formed by war and industry, what if there was only one, and only one kingdom, just one law? The moors of Britain, which were foggy, and the sands of Arabia were both inhabited by the same people. What if, though, the Roman Empire never ended? Like something out of a story. But it's not as unlikely as you think it is. As the most powerful country in the world for 1,000 years, Rome was the most important power. Its routes linked many countries together. Any rebels were put down by its armed troops. Its ideas, like patriotism, engineering, and law, had an effect on the modern world. It still fell apart in the 5th century, though. The Western Roman Empire fell apart because of corruption within the empire, the economy going downhill, and barbarians taking over land that was once Roman. Europe as a whole fell into chaos. It was called feudalism, the sickness, wars based on faith. This led to the so-called Dark Ages. But what if it didn't happen? What would happen if Rome was able to stay alive? Take a moment to think. The year is 476 AD right now. From what we know about history, this is when the barbarian general Odoacer takes Romulus Augustulus down from being the last Western Roman ruler for good. Let's change the story anyway. Let's make the case that the changes that were made to the Roman military in the late 4th century, especially by rulers like Diocletian and Constantine, worked. Let's say the lines could stay put. The business was able to stay stable. The Western Empire didn't waste its money. Instead, it put it back into the country's infrastructure. It's not true that Rome falls apart in this other world. It is able to. Because of this, by the 6th century, Europe was still one Roman-ruled area, instead of a bunch of separate Germanic countries. Anything could change. Language is the most important thing. If Europe hadn't been split up, there would be no French, Spanish, Italian, Portuguese, or Romanian languages that came from Latin. As an option, Vulgar Latin turns into a standard language that everyone in the empire speaks. We'll call this language Imperial Latin. Having a common language can help speed up schooling, communication, and learning to read and write. It sets up a bureaucratic elite that works constantly from Britain to Palestine, without the need for translation. Next, there's faith. The church is still run by the emperor, even though Christianity is growing. This is because there is no longer a power gap because Rome fell. There wasn't a big split. The Pope did not become more independent. There was no Protestant Reformation at all. Religion stops being a controversial issue and turns into a system that is supported by the government. On top of that, togetherness leads to growth. By the 8th century, the empire had made more progress into Germania and taken over the lands that had already been destroyed by its troops. The Rhine and the Danube are no longer seen as borders. They are now seen as roads. There was no reason for Rome to conquer the world. It only took a little while. The imperial system can become more modern because it doesn't have to fall apart. Early Roman engineers, like Hero of Alexandria, gave hints about how steam technology, which had been around for hundreds of years, could be improved. From the start of the 10th century on, Rome has its own industrial revolution. Think about aqueducts that are powered by steam pumps. Gaslight was used to light up the roads in Rome. Roman troops were helped by ironclad war wagons, which were sometimes called rudimentary tanks. Airships that were flying over Judea and Gaul carried the eagle flag. Being stable is what drives questions, which speeds up science. On top of that, Rome was concerned with keeping things in order. Around the year 1200, the kingdom had grown to cover most of Eurasia and North Africa. There is trade between the British Isles and the Indus Valley, and there is neither theft nor taxation at the borders. Standardized money, weights, and measures are what keep a pan-imperial economy going. Slavery was a harsh part of the ancient kingdom, but it is slowly being taken away not because it is moral, but because it saves time and money. Machines and labor groups have taken its place. People who live in the country must finish public school. Engineering schools have taken the place of the churches. As team sports and intellectual games become more popular, gladiator fights are slowly losing their appeal. Also, there is no such thing as feudalism. There would be no local lords who would split land into fiefdoms if the fall didn't happen. There are no peasants or serfs who are tied to the ground. Rome's law says that land is either privately rented or owned by the government. The rate of improvement in agricultural efficiency is faster. So there won't be any medieval stagnation. Around the year 1500, Rome is known for building huge imperial dreadnoughts instead of galleons leaving from broken countries. The first people to come to the Americas are not conquistadors, but surveyors, builders, and people who already lived there. The native nations, like the Aztecs and the Inca, face a different kind of invader. One that builds roads instead of destroying churches. Instead of getting rid of, one that combines and integrates. In fact, viruses are still spreading. That being said, a united Rome would have the tools it needs to contain, study, and fight diseases. Do you mean the year 1300? This does happen, but it's 300 years before, because people would always remember Roman art, sculpture, and philosophy. They get better over time. You could say that Michelangelo and Leonardo are not rediscovering the standards, but rather continuing a long tradition of making art. Let's now talk about politics. Just because Rome is one country doesn't mean there will always be peace. Even now, there are still civil wars. Power is still making things worse. The battles inside the country, on the other hand, include fights over who will be president, rebellions in the Senate, and coups led by generals, not never-ending massacres by nationalists. Why doesn't World War I happen? It's because there are no nation-states. No such thing as Germany. France does not exist. There is no Britain. Just regions that were run by an imperial government in the center. The killing of a Balkan prince doesn't start a war that affects the whole continent. This is because the Balkan prince in question is a citizen of Rome and not a king or queen. Or the Second World War? It's not possible. Fascism rises from the ashes of powers that were broken up by the Treaty of Versailles and are motivated by identity politics. There is no Weimar Germany to get rid of inside the borders of a united Rome. Hitler will not come back to power. The Holocaust did not happen. The creation of the atomic bomb is never rushed because there is no chance of a Second World War. The idea of nuclear power did not come from a war. It came from research in civilian areas. Rome builds nuclear power plants before it makes nuclear bombs. How about the Cold War? Rome and China are rivals, but they are good rivals, for the simple reason that China is still a country. Different kingdoms, the Han, Tang, Song, and Ming, all grow in their own ways. However, they all meet a strong and stable Rome instead of a Europe that is falling apart. We are not facing slavery, but rather competition. Most of the time, soft power is better than gunboat negotiation. Getting influence and being absorbed is an option to being enslaved or conquered. What about right now? The year is 2025. People today have to deal with climate change, the rise of digital chaos, and the rise of totalitarianism. In terms of the Roman calendar, following 2,000 years, the kingdom has reached a position that is bureaucratic, slow, and maybe even boring. In any case, it is steady. Solar screens have been bought by the company in North Africa. British Guyana has tidal windmills. Aqueducts use rails that can go across the continent very quickly. Not with TikTok, but with legal, financial, and logistical papers, the people who live there carry tablets with them. In Rome, there is no heaven. That being said, it works. The worst parts of it, like the purges, the excess, and the decadence, are lessened by a bigger picture. When you have been in charge for 2,000 years, you can look back and see what went wrong. You can make changes. You keep going. You don't fall down. Still, this is where the problem lies. Are we going to stay us? What kind of freedom would we have without defiance? If there were no dark ages, how much would we love light? Without revolt, would we ever be able to question power? It's possible that Rome never fell. Maybe it just got better over time. It might still be the most important thing, in a way. You can hear the rules, symbols, and words of that time echoing through our courts, buildings, and politics. We are in the Senate. We are in the Republic. The legions are there. There is still a ghost of Rome, even when it's not there. So it's possible that what would have happened if the Roman Empire had never fallen isn't the question that really needs to be asked. The best question might be, has it ever really died?